Everyone says justice belongs to the law, but we know the truth is often lonelier than that. Today is the story of Lorne Whitrow, where loss was carved into strength and silence became resolve. Out on the open western frontier, it all began with one small act, a horse taken in the dust. Before we kick off this adventure, don't forget to hit like on the video and let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The wind tore down from the ridge, dragging grit and grief with it. It screamed across the flats, like a wounded animal banging loose shutters and driving horses deep into their pens around Blackridge. The settlement clung to the New Mexico territory, like a half-worn brand, hard sunburned and nearly forgotten. One dirt road split the place end to end, flanked by buildings bowed with age. Dust filmed every board, and whatever time hadn't claimed outright had been eaten by rust. Lorne Whitrow stood in the doorway of her barn, eyes fixed on the dimming horizon. A washed-out calico dress hung from her shoulders, a black scarf knotted tight at her throat, the day already slipping into a quieter kind of light. Her calloused hands wrapped around the reins of her late husband's horse, an iron-gray gelding named Flint. He carried himself with the wary pride of a fighter scarred along the flank, one ear notched short from an old scrap, eyes sharp enough to catch every movement. Lorne had buried Eamon Whitrow 3 winters back, dug the grave herself after fever took him before the doctor's wagon ever arrived. People in town had offered help, but never their gaze. After that, they looked past her instead of at her. A woman holding a ranch on her own unsettled them more than any coyote howling near the edge of town. She led Flint into the stall and brushed his neck, her hand lingering in his rough mane. The barn smelled of dust and cedar shavings. It was quiet but not calm. The air felt wrong tight, as a drawn wire waiting to snap. Then the stillness shattered under pounding hooves. Lorne stepped outside, lifting a hand to shield her eyes. 5 riders crested the rise at speed, dragging a cloud of dust and bad intent behind them. At their center rode a broad-shouldered man in a long red duster, silver buckles flashing down the front, a rifle slung loose across his back like an afterthought. The others spread wide behind him, faces lost in shadow hands, resting easy near their guns. They weren't local. That much showed plain. The lead rider grinned as they slowed near Lorne's fence. "Afternoon, ma'am," he said, tipping his hat. Lorne said nothing. She stepped forward, squinting through the glare. "Don't remember inviting company." He laughed like it amused him. "Didn't figure you had to. Just looking to water the horses," he went on. "Maybe trade a story or two." Inside the barn, Flint stamped the boards. Lorne flicked her eyes toward the sound, then back to the man. "I don't have stories," she said flatly. "And I sure as hell don't have water for thieves." His smile stayed put, but never touched his eyes. "Well, now that's not neighborly." He swung down from his saddle and walked toward her with the lazy confidence of someone used to taking what he wanted. "Name's Red Kincor. You've heard of me?" Lorne gave no sign she had. The grin on his face twitched. "We're just passing through," he said. "But I spotted that horse of yours from the ridge. Fine animal." His eyes slid toward the barn. "Looks army bred." "He is." Red nodded once. "Figure he'd ride real nice with the Cinder Spur men." Lorne's gaze hardened. "He's not for sale. I wasn't asking." The moment split open like a thunderclap. Lorne's hand moved on instinct, but there was no gun at her side. Just the motion, pure defiance. Red caught it, grinned wider, and let out a sharp whistle. 2 men dropped from their saddles and rushed the barn. Lorne broke into a run, but one of them grabbed her arm and slammed her into the dirt. By the time she forced herself upright, Flint was screaming, rearing, and snapping at the rope as they hauled him from the barn. Lorne shouted after them, her voice torn raw. "You don't know what you're doing." Red Kincor turned in the saddle now, sitting easy atop Flint, and looked back at her. "Lady," he said calmly, "I reckon I do." Then they rode off, dragging the wind and dust with them. By sundown the town had drifted toward the saloon, pulled in by the noise and by Lorne's hollow-eyed return. Dust caked her clothes. A thin line of blood ran down her cheek where she'd struck the post. Feld leaned on the rail arms, folded tobacco bulging in his cheek, his interest thin as paper. "Just a horse," he muttered when she demanded he go after them. "They didn't shoot you, didn't burn the barn," he added. "You're lucky." "Flint is all I've got," Lorne said. The sheriff shrugged. "Law says they're gone. Best let it rest." Around them, the Black Ridge folk murmured, some uneasy, some curious. No one stepped forward. No one met her eyes. She turned away without a word and walked back through the dust, each step heavier than the last. The ranch felt wrong without Flint the barn, an empty husk. That night, Lorne sat alone at the kitchen table, an oil lamp wavering, an old photograph in her hands. It showed her and Eamon Whitrow, both younger, him in uniform, her in trousers wearing a cavalry coat too large for her frame. They were smiling. They always smiled back then. The next morning Lorne didn't come into town, nor the morning after that. On the third day, smoke finally rose from her chimney again. A boy from the feed store, Tobin Lark, rode past and spotted her in the yard, splitting wood while wearing her dead husband's coat. That night, she pried open the old chest beneath the floorboards. Inside lay the pieces of a life she'd buried. A cavalry-issued coat wrapped in oilcloth, still clean, still smelling faintly of leather. A short-barreled shotgun with a walnut stock. A small pouch of shells. And at the bottom, wrapped tight and creased with age, her badge bent, worn, unmistakable. Lorne studied it for a long moment, then set it aside. At first light, she saddled the mule she used for hauling an obstinate old brute named Knuckle. It wouldn't be fast travel, but she wasn't in a hurry. Before mounting, she stopped at the edge of the yard, glanced back at the ranch, and brushed the gatepost once with her fingers. Then she headed west, following the tracks Flint had left behind. They'd taken her horse. Now she would take everything else. The desert didn't welcome travelers. It watched them, burned them, tested what they were made of. Lorne Whitrow entered it without ceremony, wrapped in dust and silence. The sun hung low, bleeding across Red Hill's shadows, stretching like hands trying to drag her back. But there was nothing behind her worth staying for. Not anymore. Knuckle plodded on without complaint, ears flicking at every gust. Lorne rode light 2 canteens a rifle across her thighs, and the cold weight of steel settled at her hip. She held no false hopes about what lay ahead. The Cinder Spur men weren't the sort to apologize. Men like Red Kincor built their names on fear, not mercy. Lorne followed them by bent grass, broken brush, and pressed hoofprint signs most folks would miss, but which spoke clear as day to her. She had learned to read the land the same way Eamon Whitrow had once taught her to read men, with patience, with restraint, with quiet calculation. Nothing was meaningless. A weed bent the wrong way, a fresh pile of dung, a boot print, pressed deeper on one edge than the other. The mark of a man, riding with stolen pride, weighing him down. On the second day, she reached a homestead torn open and left to rot. Wind slipped through a door hanging crooked on rust-eaten hinges. The place had been emptied in a hurry. Chairs lay overturned grain, spilled and spoiling on the floor. Lorne called out, but the house answered only with silence. Then came a sound barely more than breath rising from beneath the floorboards. She pried up a loose plank and found the boy hiding there. 10, maybe 11. skin-pale body trembling like grass in a hard wind. She spoke softly, coaxed him out with calm words and the promise of dried meat. He clung to her briefly before pulling back. Riders came, he said. Mean ones. They carried rifles. Hurt Pa bad when he tried to stop them. Lorne's eyes swept the room. Your mother buried her after last frost, the boy whispered. It's just us now. Pa can't walk. They broke his leg. Lorne left him a sack of food in her spare canteen. Before she went, she crouched in front of him and met his eyes. Your father's a brave man, she said. He stood when others wouldn't. The boy nodded, though his mouth quivered. You're going after them, he said. Lorne didn't smile. I'm ending it. That night, the cold came sharper. Lorne made camp beneath a fractured rock face, stars hard and bright against the black sky. She draped her duster over Knuckles' back and sat beside a fire burning low. From the satchel at her saddle, she pulled a folded scrap of cloth yellowed frayed and a photograph older than her marriage. Not of Eamon. This one reached further back. In it, Lorne stood before a painted tent rifle in hand, smiling like the world owed her nothing. Behind her, scrawled in looping letters, Lorne Clay Sure Shot of the Silver West. She had once been a spectacle skirts and steel shooting for crowds drunk on noise and bravado. She could split a coin in midair, sever a rope at 30 paces fire through a spinning ring at full gallop. Some clapped, some laughed. Others whispered. A woman who outshot most men, unsettled plenty of them, but it paid. She walked away from that life when she met Eamon. He taught her to shoot for reasons that mattered, for defense, for truth, for honor. Together, they worked Pinkerton cases, hunted men worth hunting. She'd seen towns burn and gallows swing, and somewhere along the way, she tired of the name she carried. So she buried Lorne Clay and became Lorne Whitrow, a rancher's wife. Out here, names meant nothing. Only aim did. By the 4th day, she closed the distance. The tracks led through high shelves of stone, the kind of country built for ambush. The riders had grown careless. Maybe they thought no one would follow. Maybe they believed a mule couldn't climb that far. They were wrong on both counts. Lorne stayed back at first, watching from above as they made camp below. 7 men, Red Kincor among them, sprawled around a fire, drinking, laughing. Flint stood tethered near the edge of camp, nervous but unharmed, Lorne's jaw set hard as stone. She watched Red Kincor tip his head back and laugh at something one of the others said. Arrogant son of a bitch. Still, she stayed where she was. Not yet. She waited until dawn smeared the canyon walls red like fresh blood on a rock. That morning, one rider drifted away from camp to relieve himself. Lorne was already there, hidden behind a boulder. She pressed the cold mouth of her gun to the base of his skull before he sensed a thing. Make a sound, she whispered, and it's the last one you'll ever make. He froze, hands lifting slow. Young, barely more than a boy. Skin pale, eyes wide. He reeked of whiskey and sweat. Where you headed, she asked. I don't know, he said. West, I think. Red don't tell us much. How long you been riding with them? He hesitated. 3 months. Lorne looked him over. Boots too big. Belt cinched tight to keep his pants from slipping. Not a killer, at least not yet. You'll ride back to Black Ridge, she said. Take the South Ridge. Don't stop till you hit the river. If you're lying, I'll find you. He nodded fast and ran like the devil was close on his heels. Lorne watched until he vanished. That left 6. She spent the rest of the day setting her ground, calling up the old lessons. Dry brush lay just right. Soap-slicked cloth worked into the trail. She mapped the canyon's narrow throats and blind turns every place a man could run or die. By dusk, the plan was set. What she needed then wasn't noise or fury, but courage, and the quiet kind buried deep, the kind that steadies the hands when it's time to pull the trigger. She found it when she looked at Flint. That night, just after moonrise, Lorne slipped into the canyon. No torch, no sound. Only the weight of justice and a shotgun riding her shoulder. She meant to wait for dawn. But vengeance didn't care for light. Red Devil's Ridge rose from the earth, like a rusted blade, jagged and merciless. At first light, the canyon burned red heat and shadow bleeding into every crack and hollow. It was a place spoken of in low voices, a refuge for desperate men and promises already dying. Lorne Whitrow stood on the overlook, eyes narrowed on the camp below. The Cinder Spur men had grown easy. Smoke from their fire drifted lazy into the morning air, their laughter too loud for men who knew they were hunted. Flint stood tied near a rockhead, low chest heaving. Lorne saw the welts along his flank, sweat dried thick into his coat. Her fingers tightened around the rifle stock. She didn't feel the wind anymore. 6 men. She counted again. Red Kincor lounged in a camp chair like a king without a throne, boots propped on a crate shirt, open a bottle swinging loose from his hand. 1 man worked the fire. 2 threw dice near the tent. Another slept slumped against a saddle. The last sat apart slowly, drawing a blade across stone-sworn beck, patient and idle. Lorne slid between the rocks like breath itself, every step measured. She wore Eamon Whitrow's old duster, now dulled to the color of dried clay, a bandolier crossing her chest. At her hip, steel caught the light like a memory that refused to fade. The shotgun rested easy in her arms, loaded and ready. She started with the horses. They stood tethered at the far edge of camp, half-starved, half asleep. Lorne slipped among the horses, murmuring low and steady, hands calm, as she worked the knots loose one by one. Her familiar scent kept them settled. She smacked a mare hard on the rump. The animal bolted. The others followed. By the time the 3rd horse broke free, a rider shouted, "What the hell?" The camp erupted into chaos. Lorne was already behind the supply crates, shotgun leveled. The nearest man charged straight into her sights. She pulled the trigger. The blast tore through the canyon. He folded where he stood, dropping like a sack of grain, no time even to cry out. Panic ripped through the camp. Red Kincor came up, swearing, pistol in hand, eyes wild. Lorne moved fast, sliding behind a wagon, snapping another shell into place. A 2nd rider staggered into view. She fired again. He spun, collapsed, twitching in the dirt. "Goddamn Whitrow," someone yelled. Red shouted back, his voice cracking with rage. "You've got some nerve." Lorne rose from behind the crates, her sidearm drawn, now sunrise burning across her face. "You stole from me," she said. Red barked a short, bitter laugh. "You rode all this way over a horse." Lorne fired. The bullet smashed into the shoulder of the man crouched beside him. He screamed, dropped his rifle, curled into himself. "I came for what's mine," Lorne said, advancing. "And for what you did to that boy's father. And everyone else you left bleeding." 2 of the remaining riders broke and ran, scrambling up the ridge without a glance back. Lorne let them go. Cowards carried shame longer than any wound she could give. Red ducked behind a wagon revolver, bucking as he fired blind. 1 shot ripped through Lorne's sleeve, hot close. She dropped, rolled, and came up behind the tent. He never saw her until she was already there. She stepped through the canvas like a spirit and pressed the muzzle of her Colt to his temple. "Drop it." Red froze. Then he turned slowly, eyes hard. "You really think you're walking away clean?" "I'm not looking for clean," Lorne said. "I'm looking for done." She didn't pull the trigger. Instead, she wrenched the revolver from his hand and smashed the butt across his face. He went down with a groan, blood spilling from his split lip. "Strip," she said. "What, your boots, your saddle, your pride? Take it off." Disbelief flashed, then fury. "I'll kill you for this," he spat. "No," Lorne said. "You won't." She made him remove every piece, until he stood shaking in long johns and socks. Then she bound his hands, mounted Flint, and looked down at him from the saddle. "You walk out barefoot," she said. "Let every town between here and Black Ridge see what's left of a man who thought he could steal from a widow." Red snarled something low and vile. Lorne didn't answer. She turned Flint and rode past the shattered camp, past the wounded groaning and the cowards hiding in the rocks. She left them to the dust, the circling vultures, and whatever regrets still clung to them. By the time she reached the ridge, the country opened wide ahead, empty, endless. The wind rose again, tugging at her coat, lifting her hair. Lorne drew a slow, steady breath. It was finished, though she knew better than to think it would be forgotten. The trail back toward Black Ridge felt altered beneath her. The land was the same, but Lorne Whitrow was not. Flint carried her with the sure-footed calm of an old companion, no longer stolen property, but a reclaimed piece of herself. Morning light skimmed the canyon walls behind her, and for the first time in days, the wind didn't feel like a warning. It felt like approval. She didn't hurry. Vengeance had burned through and passed, leaving something heavier in its wake, quiet, settled. She had stripped Red Kingcore of his power, not with lead, but with shame. The story would travel. It always did. Folks would tell it by firelight, the widow who rode alone into Red Devil's Ridge and broke the riders. Details would swell and shift, but the truth would remain, even if spoken only in low voices. Lorne Whitrow was not a woman to be tested. As she neared town, eyes peeked from windows and saloon doors. She didn't slow. She rode Flint straight down Main Street, hat low coat, dark with dust and sweat, the worn colt resting easy at her hip. A hush followed her, respectful, uncertain. Orenfeld waited outside the jailhouse, arms crossed, eyes guarded. He took in the blood on her cuff, the steadiness in her gaze, and swallowed whatever speech he'd prepared. "You bring trouble with you, Lorne," he said. "No," she replied. "I sent it limping the other way." He glanced past her, searching for prisoners or a posse. There were none. "Kingcore's alive," she added. "Mostly. He'll be walking home barefoot, no saddle, no boots, and no name worth spitting." The sheriff didn't smile, but the corner of his mouth twitched. "Suppose that passes for justice." "It'll do," she said. He stepped aside without another word. Lorne rode on, reaching her ranch as the sun slipped behind the hills. The barn stood quiet, the gate still ajar from the day she'd left. She swung down, ran a hand along Flint's neck, and led him into the stall. He didn't resist. He knew he was home. Inside the house, nothing had changed: the table, the empty chair, the unopened tin of coffee. She lit the lamp and sat, hands folded. The badge lay before her, bent, from years hidden away. She turned it once, then slid it into a drawer. That chapter was closed. Outside stars emerged one by one against the dark. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, not hungry, but knowing. There would be talk. Some would fear her now. Others would seek her out, ask her to wear the badge again, to hunt every devil crossing the territory. But she was never theirs to call back. What she'd done wasn't for a badge or applause. It was done because something precious had been taken from her, and she'd taken it back on her own terms. Lorne Whitrow stepped onto the porch and fixed her eyes on the far line of the horizon. The land lay open and still wide enough to swallow a lifetime. She could stay. She could settle for good, hang up her hat, mend broken fences, break young horses, let the story of Red Devil's Ridge cool into rumor and myth. But the road had a voice of its own. It spoke of others cut loose by wrong people standing alone, with nothing but resolve and a steady hand. Someday someone like that might need a rider like her. Lorne turned back inside and packed light the same way she always had. This time she left the door unlatched. By first light she was gone again, and behind her the dust kept moving, carrying a story the wind would never allow to fade. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. We appreciate you more than you think. If this tale stirred something deep inside, we invite you to remain part of this frontier of memories. More true stories of honor, compassion, and destiny are waiting for you here. Subscribe, share, comment, and thank you for writing with us today. Aviso legal barra disclaimer. Our content is designed for artistic and entertainment purposes and may reinterpret historical themes using fictional touches. We apply AI tools thoughtfully, only to support production, while keeping human supervision over editing, emotional tone, and narrative coherence. We always comply with regulatory guidelines for AI-based media and avoid deepfake practices or identity manipulation. All supporting components remain legally sourced. Please ask for authorization before sharing or adapting any segment. Your respect makes it possible for us to continue telling meaningful stories.